So, you guys know Ken Ham, right? And you know about the website Answers in Genesis, I'm guessing, maybe. If you don't, it's full of very fundamental Christian writing and answers to things. They very much believe in creationism and that everything that happened in Genesis literally happened, as well as most of the other things in the Bible. It's one thing having actual adults believe this, but it's another thing teaching it to kids. Yesterday, I found the website Answers in Genesis for kids, and it's all about educating kids about the Bible and about science. I put science in quote marks because there is so much wrong with this, just so much. I actually spoke to my sister-in-law briefly about this, because if you don't know, she's a lovely, lovely person, and she also happens to be a Christian, a mother, and a doctor, so she's very, very intelligent. And I asked her, I was like, how do you feel about other Christians who, you know, teach their children these facts that we know are wrong, like that the earth is 6,000 years old, like evolution never happened, this sort of thing. And, you know, she said that she'd never do it, and she thinks it's unfair to just teach kids one point of view. She thinks it's important to show kids the evidence of things and let them come to their own conclusions. And that's actually how she's raising my nephew. They do take him to church with them, and, you know, he does learn about the Bible and things like that, but ultimately they're leaving it up to him when he gets older to decide what he wants to do, whether he wants to get baptized and be a Christian, or whether he wants to go his own way. And I really like that. I think that's a wonderful way, not only to parent, but just to teach kids in general. But Answers in Genesis for kids is the complete opposite of that. It's teaching kids so many wrong things and just gets the fundamentals of science and what science is. It gets it completely wrong, and that is very problematic. One of the first articles I found when I came to the site, it was on a big banner image. It was called "Are People Just Animals?" And now before we even read this article, I can give you that answer. Yes. Yes, we are. Because in very basic terms, an animal is defined as a multicellular living organism which feeds on organic matter. Their cells are diploid eukaryotes without cell walls, and in almost all cases, with the exception of sponges, the cells are organised into tissues and the tissues are organised into organs, and so on. So, if that's what an animal is, humans are an animal. Humans are multicellular organisms. Humans feed on organic matter. Humans have diploid cells, meaning we have 2 copies of genetic material, we have 2 of each chromosome, and so on. We fulfill all the criteria to be an animal. In my opinion, the best way to teach a kid this is to give them the definition of what an animal is, to teach them the characteristics of a human, and then let them figure out, are those characteristics the same? Are human animals? And if you teach them right, you teach them the right methodology, you're showing them the right evidence, they'll come up with the answer, yes. But not only does Answers in Genesis for kids give a different and objectively wrong answer, but it uses unscientific reasoning in an attempt to explain it. So, not surprisingly, it starts with a Bible quote from Genesis. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Which is Genesis 1:27. Then it goes on to talk a little bit about evolution, explaining how evolution teaches that people evolved from an ape-like ancestor, which essentially is true if we really want to simplify things down, which for kids is fair enough. Problem is, it doesn't explain what it means to evolve. What is evolution? It doesn't explain the proof we have for evolution, it doesn't explain the fossils we found, it doesn't explain the DNA evidence we have, it doesn't explain how evolutionists come to that conclusion, or should I say, it doesn't explain how scientists come to that conclusion. Apparently that stuff just isn't as important as just dismissing the idea of evolution altogether with the statement, evolutionists believe that people aren't really special, but are just smarter animals than a horse, an elephant, or a monkey. I mean, what a way to make kids feel crappy about themselves. Evolutionists don't think you're special, but we do. So if you want to feel special, you're gonna have to believe in God. I mean, like, I don't want to sound harsh, but essentially, that's a bit of emotional manipulation there, saying that if a kid wants to feel special, if a kid wants to be told they're special, which, let's face it, all kids do, they have to believe in God because otherwise they're just not important. But that's not true. Humans being animals don't make us any more or less important. It's just what we are. That's a fact. And then when the kid is caught unaware, feeling a bit rubbish about themselves, they jump in there by saying, take a look at our Bible verse. Does evolution match with what the Bible says about people? No! That's all well and good, but the Bible is nothing but a collection of inconsistent stories written over a very long period of time by a large number of people. It's not a reliable, accurate, or peer-reviewed piece of academic or scientific writing. It's not a reliable source of information about science. None of that is explained in this article. It just makes out like the Bible is the ultimate source of all information and everything else is lesser than it. And that is such a dangerous thing to be teaching kids. If you really want to teach a kid about religion alongside science, we should be getting them to ask, does what the Bible say match with the evidence of evolution? That way kids are thinking critically not only about the scientific evidence, but about what's in the Bible, and they can come to their own conclusions. Teaching kids to think for themselves is incredible, and that's what we need to be doing. So this article, this is a short article, but it's full of inconsistencies at like every sentence, so I'm kind of going to pick this apart bit by bit. So the article goes on to say that the Bible teaches that people are made in God's image, and I think this might be one of the only true statements on the entire page. Because yeah, the Bible does actually say that. Like literally, the Bible says that. But that doesn't mean that what the Bible is saying is true. We've already established this. The Bible is essentially a storybook. It's not a piece of scientific literature. So that statement doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't teach anything other than, essentially telling what's in a story. The next part of the article reads, animals were not made in God's image, only people were. Not only are we made in God's image, but we are created separately from the animals, which God simply spoke into life. And this is where the article starts to get really problematic, because it's literally spreading false information now. It reads, Genesis 2:7 records God specifically forming Adam from dust, and a few verses later, in verses 21 to 22, God specifically makes Eve from one of Adam's ribs. People were made in a special way. Again, a storybook isn't scientific proof. And even if you don't want to accept the Bible as just a storybook, if you want to take it as a kind of code of ethics or morals or teachings, things like that, that's fine, but that still doesn't make it a science book. It still doesn't make it scientifically accurate. And in fact, what this section of the Bible is saying is literally impossible. We're teaching kids that apparently the impossible happened. I mean, even if it was true, then it never explains how it happened, or even why it happened, to be honest. Why did God want to create people in the first place? And I thought evolutionists were all about this whole life can't come from non-living matter thing, and yet here they are claiming Adam was formed from dust. It makes no sense to me. It's a really strange thing. And all of this ignores so many huge pieces of evidence, not just fossil records of our ancestors, but the basic things we see today. The fact that we share so many traits with animals, we share the same types of cells, we generate energy through respiration in the same way as other animals, and our DNA is so similar. I mean, we literally have an 84% DNA match with dogs, a 90% DNA match with mice, and a 98.9% DNA match with chimpanzees. If we're not animals, if we were made in an entirely different way, and we're nothing like animals, why all the similarities? Why do we share the exact same traits that define an animal as an animal? Next up, we get to the really silly stuff, and this is where they show a basic misunderstanding of the key terms in classification of living beings. So if you're not aware of the classification system, or you're just a little bit rusty and want to recap, basically there are a few different basic classification levels that define kind of what a living creature is. So first they're split into kingdoms. Are they animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, or protists, which are single-celled organisms? From that they're split into phylum, class, order, family, genus, and finally species. A species is defined as a group who can interbreed to produce fertile offspring. That's why even though there's lots of different breeds of dog, they're all the same species. Humans are all the same species. So what is really important to realise here is that when we're teaching kids, or when we're asking kids, are humans animals, what we're really asking is, what kingdom do humans fit into? Because as living things, we have to be classed as one of them. So are we animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, or protists? Well, we're definitely not single-celled organisms, so we can cross protists out, and most bacteria. We're definitely not fungi. We're definitely not plants. So we must be animals, right? I mean, that makes sense to me. We have all the characteristics of animals. We've got to be animals. But by claiming humans aren't animals, you're trying to say that the whole classification system either needs to be thrown out or rewritten altogether. I mean, what, do you want to create like a sixth kingdom just for humans? Because that wouldn't really make sense. There would literally just be one species in that kingdom, which would be people. And their characteristics would be identical to animals, in which case why bother having a separate kingdom altogether? Anyway, next up we get to the bit where their science is really wrong. So they talk about how animals can't think or talk. Some animals can copy speech and communicate in a basic way, but they don't really talk like people. Animals can't have complex emotions like disgust or regret, or display creativity by playing music or painting a beautiful, meaningful painting. And there's quite a few things to discuss here, so bear with me while we get into this. Firstly, those characteristics do not decide what kingdom you fit into. Again, this shows a thorough misunderstanding of the terminology you're using, or trying to use. As I mentioned before, to simplify things a lot, your kingdom is decided on things like your cell type, your cell structure, how you generate energy, where you get your energy from, not whether you can talk or not. You know, if they're claiming humans aren't animals, I wouldn't be surprised if the people writing this are also trying to classify mushrooms as a type of plant, or bacteria as a type of animal. That would be just as wrong as saying humans aren't animals. Next huge problem with this is the statement animals can't think. But this isn't entirely true either, is it? I mean, again, this shows a basic lack of understanding of how the brain works. I mean, thinking is a very vague term anyway, but if we take it to mean having a consciousness, then there is actually a little bit of debate about how much of a consciousness animals have. Like I say, there's a lot of research going on, a lot of studies into it, and there's a lot of interesting stuff you can read out there. In the description below, I've actually put a really nice, basic National Geographic article that talks about a couple of the arguments and a couple of the bits of evidence partway through it, and it's a really interesting little read. Like I say, it's not overwhelming in terms of kind of big scientific or academic terms. It's just a nice, simple read that everyone can understand, so I thought it would be a nice one to include down there. But if you ask me, looking at all the evidence, examining a lot of the evidence, I would say that most animals, a large proportion of animals, particularly mammals, do show evidence of conscious thought. They clearly feel emotions more than just, instinctual fight or flight reactions. They play with each other, they communicate with each other, they communicate with people and other species. They learn things, they teach things to others, they have rituals, they have traditions, like passed down from generation to generation. Some animals use tools, some have these incredible memories, some can pick up quickly how to complete complex tasks, they can recognize symbols, they can recognize facial expressions. To me, that suggests a consciousness, that suggests a level of thought. Although I know a lot more research needs to be done and we can't say for certain right now, yes, animals have a consciousness, but to me at least, the evidence at the minute is pointing in that direction, that at least a lot of mammals do. Same with this idea that animals can't have complex emotions like disgust or regret. Again, this is really oversimplifying things, and a lot of research has been done into this area. Research has shown that some animals do feel empathy for others in their species. Some animals feel empathy for humans and people. They feel sorrow, they feel happiness, they understand when and how to trust people, they understand when and why to fear others. The studies on empathy are particularly really important here, because for a long time, empathy was supposed to be this very, very human emotion. It was something that made us different to animals. But finding evidence of it in animals, seeing animals displaying empathy, especially elephants, it's been seen a lot in elephants, that might mean that we're more similar than we ever thought, and I think that's pretty incredible. That's exciting. Finally, the point about animals not being creative. And I mean, just because you've never seen a monkey playing a trombone in an orchestra, does that happen? Do you get trombones in orchestras? I don't know. But anyway, just because you've not seen a monkey playing an instrument doesn't mean they're not creative. Look at birds using small needles as tools to pick out bugs from inside trees. Look at otters using rocks to break open crab shells. Look at the elephants who paint pictures of themselves and other elephants. Not only does that show creativity, but it shows an awareness and a sense of self. That's pretty amazing. I think it's a really dangerous thing to teach kids that, animals don't feel this, animals don't do this. It's teaching them that animals are lesser than us, the animals don't deserve the same respect as we do. It's teaching kids not to show animals kindness and love and trust and respect, and I think that's a really worrying thing. Kids should know that animals are incredible. Animals are very smart and intelligent. Animals can feel things too, and they're a pretty amazing part of this world that we still only know a tiny amount about, and that it's worth doing so much more research into because they're amazing. Anyway, this article finally ends with saying only humans can pray to God or no God. But maybe that's just because humans are the ones who created God. That's just what I think. I mean, surely if there was a God and he created animals, at least they would be aware of him too on some kind of level. I don't know, maybe not. That's just the way I see things. But what I do know is that I believe God and religion are man-made social constructs. So if we're the only species praying to him, maybe that's the reason why. But anyway, they're just my thoughts on this terrible, poorly researched article or little post or whatever. And I just think if there's any parents or teachers or adults out there showing this to children, I just beg them to stop, please, because it's awful. And you're teaching children terrible skills, you're teaching them terrible facts that are just untrue, and you're not teaching them to think for themselves. You're teaching them to just believe whatever they're told, because this article gives no evidence for any of its claims. So that's pretty terrible, to be honest. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments. If you like this video, I might do another series kind of debunking some of these children's science articles, because there's a lot of terrible ones out there, and they're just... it's so bad. The fact that they get basic science wrong. I mean, like learning what a kingdom was. I learned that when I was like 7 years old. And if I could understand it at 7 years old, you'd think this like 50, 60-year-old man could understand it, but apparently not. This sort of stuff seriously worries me, because if kids learn like this, then poor kids. It worries me. It really worries me. But I'm gonna end this here. If you've made it through this far, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you again soon.